Here we have a very good example of ideology meeting reality headlong. And it goes like this. Brighton kicks the Weedkiller ban to the curb after 5 years because, well, as you can see, the Weedkiller ban meant, who would have thought of it? Weeds all over the place. And now Brighton looks a bit like the jungle that the Green Party wanted it to turn into, no doubt. All right, I'm Graniopteryx. So what happened was this. About 5 years ago, the Green Party, who were in control of Brighton and Hove at the time, decided they didn't like glyphosate. Look, glyphosate isn't good stuff. It is a chemical. It does damage wildlife. So instead of just talking about limiting the damage in some way, being Greens, they decided, no, we're not going to have anything to do with glyphosate from now on. And, well, this is the result. You see, it's not only that the pavement has been covered in weeds, but it means that at night time you could damage yourself walking down there, tripping up over some of the weeds, or even over the damaged pavements, which will all have to be replaced once the weeds have gone, because they will go now. More about that in a minute. So it's dangerous for people. Now, the thing about the green agenda is that people actually don't count that much, so they would have kept on with this. There are some counter arguments. I'm not saying they were completely mad. Right, let's carry on with this article. One of the first councils in Britain to ban Weedkiller has dropped the strategy after streets and footpaths became choked by weeds. Brighton and Hove was branded a city of triffids after the council imposed a ban on the use of glyphosate, which is in most weed killers. They did that in 2019. And now weeds standing up to 5 feet tall block pathways, trail across streets and snake up lampposts. And after 5 years of complaints, so you see, all the people who voted for the Greens are now complaining because they've got weeds outside their front door. I don't know what it is about some ideologies that blocks people's minds so they can't predict a very easily predictable future. The council has admitted the situation has become untenable and has voted to reintroduce glyphosate. Councillor Tim Rokins said, councillors said it was time to take back the streets. They said every conceivable alternative method to keep the weeds at bay had been tried, including mechanical rippers, boiling water and specialised foam, but all to no avail. You see, in the 19th century, when they didn't have weed killers, well, actually they used arsenic, didn't they? Or maybe that's vermin killers. They didn't have weed killers. They had hundreds of peasants and gardeners working for next to nothing, pulling up weeds. But you don't have that nowadays. All the peasants are now getting well-paid jobs in reasonably well-paid jobs in supermarkets and offices, or even running businesses, because the world has changed. And the Greens seem to think we can return to some sort of medieval rural idyll. Well, you can't. If you're living in towns, you have to keep the towns tidy. And we have too many people now for everybody to be living in a rural idyll. Councillor Tim Rokins said, since then, 2019, the council has relied on manual removal. And let me be clear what that means. It means giving our street staff hose. Now, if you're in America, you might have misunderstood that as some sort of reward to the street staff for working in the streets. But no. In this case, the hoe I'm referring to is a long stick with a little sort of spade thing at the end that you can use to dig plants out one at a time. I just thought I'd mention that. Anyway, little wonder, says Tim Rokins. He's a Labour councillor. Little wonder that since we took over in 2023, we've had so many desperate requests to do something. Yeah, you vote Green, you get Green. Possibly a little more green than you had counted on. After 5 full years of unchecked growth, routes are so well established that they've begun damaging roads and pavements. I'd say they more or less finished the job. This here is a pavement. I can't see it, and it would force anybody to walk on the road. If you're doing that at night and get knocked over by a car, this is more dangerous for you than glyphosate. And also, the driver of the car probably won't feel so good for the rest of his or her life either. This pavement begun hang on, how does he say? Begun damaging the roads? No, that's completely damaged. There is no way. You get rid of those weeds, there's going to be huge holes in the road and several places where the pavement is actually rising. The only thing you can do is harrow the whole thing and relay the entire pavement. And that, well, you need an excavator to find the pavement there. The council approved the managed reintroduction of the herbicide to tackle the weeds using a controlled droplet method. Yeah, okay, a compromise, which is what idealists refuse to do. Applying it to individual weeds rather than blanket spraying of pavements and roads. Whoop-de-doo, who would have thought of doing that? Well, anybody sensible would, but yeah, Greens. Glyphosate will not be used in any of the city's public parks, children's play areas or open spaces. Okay, now, eco-conscious residents are furious as they say the move will harm the wildlife, particularly the starling population. And we have to consider that there is a counter-argument. It's just a counter-argument that thinks of starlings and not people. Brighton and Hove is famous for the stunning murmurations of starlings who fly around in huge flocks over the seafront at dusk. You see them they're like one organism, folding and swirling. It's a beautiful sight. And yes, we have to consider that. Steve Gelliott of Save Our Starlings said Brighton and Hove once had a population of more than 150,000 starlings, but 2 years ago this was down to 8,000, and last winter there was a recovery to 13,000, and that's probably because they stopped the spraying of glyphosate. But it's not a huge improvement, and there must be other things that are cutting down the starlings' reproduction as well. There has to be, and most of that will have something to do with the fact that they're building houses which stop the starlings from nesting. There's all sorts of interference from people. There's light interference. At night time, there's street lights and car lights that stop starlings from sleeping. They, like anything else, they need their sleep to stay healthy as well. There are all sorts of things beside glyphosate. Anyway, Steve Gelliott said, it is coincidental. Well, is it? Yeah, possibly to a certain extent. But what is good for the starlings is not using pesticides, keeping wild verges and anything supporting wildflowers and insects. And he's right. He's right. And we have to strike a balance between wishing to live and wishing to have starlings. And we've got to find a balance. That doesn't mean to say we have to cut our own throats for the sake of the starlings. Here, look at this. Anyone in a wheelchair would have serious trouble with this. And we do have people in wheelchairs now as well. Okay, up to 50 protesters. Brighton and Hove has a population of nearly, is it 300,000? Hang on a minute, I'm going to look. well, 290,395, according to a 2018 statistic. So it'll be, it'll probably be 300,000 by now. And they managed to get 50 protesters gathered prior to the council meeting to voice their opposition. And a petition to maintain the ban has gathered more than 1,000 signatures. Somehow, I think that the Save Our Starlings or the Green lot are fighting a losing battle. Richard Jeffrey said, "This is a backward step. Biodiversity has increased since the decision to ban glyphosate was taken. To reintroduce now will wipe out all those gains." Well, it depends how it's been reintroduced, doesn't it? If it's kept to the pavements, then I don't see what the problem is. You won't get that many starlings on the pavements anyway, however much biodiversity there is there. And Rokins said, "Continuing as we are is not an option." So, that's the point. Idealism, smack into reality and modernity. Now, if these people want to live in the Middle Ages, they should leave Brighton. The trouble with a lot of green people is they like living in the city. They find that good, the meeting the other people of like mind, the local cafes, all the rest of it. But they won't pay the price. They don't even understand the price. I'm interrupting to remind you to click like and to subscribe and share. Also, I'm constantly being told that YouTube removes subscriptions, so please click the notification bell and check that you really are subscribed. All the links to my other channels are in the description, including links to donation sites. I'm always grateful, of course, for donations, but simply clicking like is the best thing you can do for this video and my channel generally. Thank you. If they want to live in a place where streets don't have to be sprayed to keep them weed free, then they should find a place where there are no streets, out in the country somewhere. But they don't like that, you see, because it means they can't get to their local cafes that easily. They can't meet other people. They can't get an engineer to come out and deal with their computer when it's broken down without a long wait and expenses for the long trip out. They don't like that. They want to live in a city, and then they vote green, and then they want to turn the city into the countryside. You can't do that, mate. It just doesn't work. All right, till next time. Why not treat yourself or a favoured relative or friend to these magnificent examples of merch? The mugs and t-shirts come in the Graniopteryx design or Grambo with a firearm or the more deadly knitting needles. Go to www.graniopteryx.com and whatever platform you're watching this on, please click like, subscribe and share.